horses, but I didn't like experimental psychology. Rats running around mazes was not as interesting as what runs around people's heads. I switched my major to sociology, especially of the family, just as I learned I was having a child of my own. Dan and I got married, and I threw up every morning for 3 months with a smile on my face. When it came time, we had no money to go to a private hospital, so we went to the Bronx Municipal Hospital. The nurse must have been the American cousin to Fräulein Riesenfeld. 17 hours and you're still not ready? You'll need a cesarean. What does that mean? It means you've had your fun, now you'll pay for it. This beautiful child, this miracle, this first time ever any woman gave birth. Miriam, my daughter. Someone loaned me a beautiful French baby carriage, which was as tall as I was. And I pushed Miriam to visit every friend I had met. I knew they were thinking, how could she have this child with that little body of hers? I was thinking the same thing. When I pushed Miriam home, I stopped before the Ohav Shalom synagogue. I didn't belong to it. I didn't know if I wanted to, even if I had the money. But when I lifted Miriam up and held her close, I felt I was hugging my family who came before me, and all those yet to come. Later, I joined that synagogue. Now I belong to two. When one asks where I was last week, I can say I was at the other. Dan was a kind man, a simple man. But between the two of us, marriage can withstand many pressures, but the one thing it cannot bear is boredom. Physical stimulation is a wonderful thing, but without mental stimulation, you can sleep through it. When Miriam was 1 year old, Dan and I divorced. We realized that what we had was a fabulous love affair, but nothing more. Dan was debonair, a snappy dresser. My rent was $55 a month. Miriam and I ate egg sandwiches. I had 3 blouses and 1 black corduroy suit that I washed and brushed and wore every day until it fell apart. Being a single mother wasn't easy. If I kept busy enough, I wouldn't think about it. I took turns babysitting with my neighbors so that I could look for work and go to school. I got a job doing market research for $1 an hour. I called people on the telephone and asked their opinion. I never had a phone in Paris or Jerusalem, so I never thought people could hear me unless I shouted. Hello, I am calling from Harris Research. Can I get your opinion on towels? Do you like red, green, or yellow the best? No, I am not angry. There is no wrong answer, just pick one. After work, every night, I thought, this is the new American dream. Someday I will be so successful, I will have a Frigidaire and a maid once a week. After I got my master's from the new school in 1959, I promised Miriam nothing would stop me from becoming a doctor. I went on for my doctorate of education and had my thesis approved, Orphans of the Holocaust. And then I took my orals.
Ruth, come in. Please, call me Eric. I'd like to speak to you about a very puzzling paper where you disagree with the thrust of my book, Hitler's Rise and America's Disgrace.
I agree with many points, Professor.
Eric.
Yes, Eric. America should have entered the war earlier, and yes, they should have taken in Jewish children.
You're a Jew, are you not? And you should know better than anyone America did nothing. Their response was inexcusably late, and your forgiving that is even more inexcusable.
Yes, their response was late, but America helped to defeat Hitler. America took me in. Without this country, how do you ever think I would ever be standing here today? I failed the exam. I took it again, I failed again. Never in my life have I ever been so humiliated. I had let Miriam down. I would never be a doctor. Why did I ever think I could be? I would be a single mother who would spend the rest of her life talking about towels. Do you know what this is? This is a Steakhouse-Menschen doll. If you knock it down, it bounces back. When I am knocked down, I say done and move on. What other choice is there? Fred bought me this when I saw it in a shop. I will tell you about Freddie. We met on January 1st, 1961 at the Bel Air Resort in the Catskills skiing. That's right, you remember skiing. I drove there with my friend Hans, who was part of a ski club. Do you know what a T-bar is? Two people sit on a bar of metal that drags you up the mountain. This can be a problem when one person is only 4'7" and the other is over 6 feet tall. When the bar was under Hans's behind, it was under my neck. When it was under my behind, Hans was stretched out like rigor mortis. It was a long ride. At the top of the mountain, Hans introduced me to his club's president. Dark hair, glasses, a big smile, and he was short. I said, Hans, the next time I ride up that mountain, I do it with that short guy. And so I did. We started talking when we got on the lift. We talked all that day and that night until 2 in the morning. When I got home, I called my friend Debbie and said, I just met the man I'm going to marry. His name is Manfred Westheimer. Fred tells people it was the biggest skiing accident he ever had. Fred is sensible, I'm impulsive, I like to spend, he likes to save, he calls it thrifty. I like to go out, he likes to stay home and watch The Odd Couple. Fred is Jewish. He and his family escaped Hitler and went to Portugal. Now we were both here. He was handsome, interesting, and employed. A chief engineer. He liked children and played Jewish folk songs on his guitar and harmonica. What could be better? It would be better if he didn't have 2 girlfriends. 2! And they were real competition. 1 gave long back rubs, and 2 made great herring salad. Plus, herring salad was one of 6 people Fred rented a house with at Lake Ascoana that summer. I wanted to rent a room in the same house as Fred, but they wouldn't allow children, and I wouldn't go without Miriam, so now what? Stay home and say goodbye every weekend? Not me. I found out there was a bungalow next to Fred's for rent. That was good, but for $500, not so good. I decided to sell shares. I told my friends there was a beautiful lakefront house for rent, but we must keep Ascoana our secret and never mention its name, or else all of New York would be up there. 3 calls and the house was full. Fred even bought a share. But he said that he would have to go up to the other house for his meals since he had already paid for them. Thrifty. Oh, still, Freddie took more doing. When we got home from the lake house to New York, I wanted to impress Fred with my cooking, but I couldn't boil water. It was time for what I later called a Westheimer maneuver. I asked my friend Kata Bauman to cook a wonderful Rosh Hashanah supper and told my friends to pretend it was mine and praise my cooking in front of Fred. They did. But I heard one friend whisper to another in Hebrew that kata made a great meal. Israelis have a habit of talking to each other in Hebrew and thinking no one else can understand them. Fred helped me clear the dishes, and in the kitchen he said, everything was delicious. I wish I could speak better Hebrew so I could tell kata myself. Oh, Fred never let me forget that one. Freddie faced the inevitable on the day he took Miriam and me out driving in his Renault. Miriam said, when you two get married, will this be my car too? Fred nearly drove into the lake. I said, Miriam, Fred has no interest in marriage. We'll get a car of our own. Frieda Hirsch's son, Peter. Yes, the handsome one. Sells sports cars. He keeps asking me to come by. He says he has a deal for me that will make my head spin. The next weekend, we were hiking in the Catskills and Fred said, Ruth, I think we should get married. I said, Freddie, whatever you want. He did say there was one condition. We had to get married before the end of the year for tax reasons. On December 10th, 1961, we had our wedding at the Windermere Hotel on the Upper West Side. Met and married in less than 1 year. My greatest Westheimer maneuver! Fred and I both wanted another child. 6 months after the wedding, Joel was born.
6 months.
At Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. I raised Joel the same way I raised Miriam. Zionism and idealism were important. They both went to kibbutz summer camps, no spoiled kids, no pony rides. And when they were in school, I took a part-time job for Planned Parenthood. I was hired to supervise a survey of the contraception and abortion history of 2,000 women in Harlem. My job was training the women who would collect the data, how to interview a subject, fill out a questionnaire. Sometimes I went with them, not to supervise, just to listen. I sat quietly, yes, quietly, and I heard about their lives, the choices they made, but mostly the ones they didn't. Oh. You see my dollhouses? A friend made this for me. Can you see the family inside? Mother, father, children. Here in the nursery, a baby with miniature baby toys. All the furniture looks so real. It was all made between World War I and II. I left my first dollhouse at home when I was sent to Wartheim. Now I have 6. I collect them, I decorate them, but I don't let my grandchildren play with them. The little furniture, the little families stay exactly where I put them. They never leave. They are as happy as I want them to be. In the first 10 years of my life, I had a family who loved me. That was so important. Because of that love, I survived being an orphan. With my dollhouses, I have the control I never had in my world. I wanted to give the women of Harlem the same control of their own lives. At Planned Parenthood, I realized I wanted to teach sex education. To me, sex is such an important part to the human relationship. It is the reason we are here. So basic to who we are. I had to learn more. I decided to have courage and take one course at Columbia Teachers College. I was so afraid of failing again. But I got an A. It was all I needed. I went full speed ahead. I was awarded my degree in June of 1970. Doctorate of Education. I was a doctor. Me. Dean's List. I marched at the front of the procession in my cap and gown and waved to the children. I never wanted to take that gown off, if my father could have seen me. That summer, I became an instructor at Lehman College in the Bronx. I still love to teach, I'll never stop. Lehman or Princeton or Yale, I learn from my students as they learn from me. I set rules for myself. I would never ask personal questions. A person's sexuality is a private thing unless they bring it up themselves. I decided this when I heard a physician at a seminar once say, "I'd like to reveal something I've never told anyone, not even my wife. I get very aroused with a strong erection whenever I see a cow." Nobody said anything. People are polite. But the next day, when he walked into his office, I know everyone around him was thinking, "Moo." Do you know Dr. Helen Singer Kaplan? She worked with Masters and Johnson, and she wrote the New Sex Therapy. It was a Bible for sex therapists. I went to hear her speak. She was so smart. When she asked for questions, I wanted so badly to come up with one, but I was the only person in the auditorium that was not a medical doctor. Dr. Kaplan, I agree that men who have premature ejaculation problems do not have this problem because they dislike women. So, do you think then that instead of analysis, this could be helped by education? She did. Good question. I rushed up to her afterwards. "Doctor, I've admired your work for years. Could I possibly visit your sex therapist training program at Cornell?" She said yes. This was on a Wednesday. I was there Thursday. Once a week, we sat behind a two-way mirror and observed Dr. Kaplan conduct sex therapy. She and her patient talked about the most intimate details. They were very comfortable. My face was red through every session. I am very old-fashioned. I am a big square. But I went to every class. And I realized I wanted to be a sex therapist. A psychiatrist once told me this made perfect sense because after I left the hugs I had at home behind, I wasn't touched until I met Walter. Touching, kissing, expressing myself physically was so important. It brought back the intimacy and family I no longer had. He said that studying with Dr. Kaplan made logical sense because I realized how important this was to everyone. I decided there were two conditions I would not treat: sadomasochism, because a therapist has to visualize, and I don't want to, and bestiality. I am not a veterinarian. One day, a letter arrived to the Institute asking if one of us would address the community affairs managers of all the radio stations in New York on the need for sex education. I called and said I would come and talk. No fee? Fine. The meeting was at the St. Moritz Hotel. In the elevator, I wished I had said no. I was going to have a room full of prominent people listening to me for 15 minutes. How could I make 15 minutes so important? Thank you for inviting me. I have some important words to tell you. Words you don't normally hear on your radio stations. Words like contraception, unwanted pregnancies, venereal disease, and the most important word, education. So many young people and adults are not educated in the facts and responsibilities of their sexual conduct. To most, sexual education is left to their significant others. That is a sociological term for someone who can affect change in another person's life. Parents, teachers, even if they do help, are not enough. You, broadcasters, are significant others. You should have programs on the air to educate your listeners. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once said, education is the point at which we decide we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. It is up to us, all of us, together. Let us take responsibility. Can I answer any questions? Hands popped up. That I expected, but not what happened next.
Stay tuned for the premiere of WYNY's call-in show, Sexually Speaking, with Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer. Listeners can call in at 212-873-7888.
Hello?
Doctor, the button. The white button.
This is Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer, and you are listening to Sexually Speaking. I am not a medical doctor, and I do not do therapy on the air. I am here to educate. If there is something you want me to talk about relating to sexual matters, you can reach me at 212-873-7888.
Call on line 1.
You are on the air?
Dr. Westheimer, our daughter walked in on my husband and me while we were having sex on our living room floor.
Tell me, how old is your daughter?
5. She was afraid and started crying, but my husband just crawled behind the couch. She still won't talk about it. Neither will my husband. What should I do?
I'm glad you're asking this because this happens to many parents with young children. The first thing is that making love on tables and floors in any room of the house is wonderful, as long as the doors have locks. The second is that you should take your daughter aside and say, honey, the other day when you came in, Daddy wasn't hurting Mommy. Mommy and Daddy made love and it felt good. Use that term, made love. If there's moaning and groaning, it's only because it feels good. And tell your husband to get out from behind the couch.
I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Doctor, the board is lighting up.
Oh, the show started at midnight and ran for 15 minutes. On the third show, I was given the name I am best known for. I forgot to put these on the first time. You are on the air.
Dr. Dr. Ruth?
I am Dr. Ruth.
I'd like your advice. I'm 21 and I've been seeing an older man for almost 2 years now.
How much older?
He's 37.
Go on.
We have a really good relationship except for one thing. He won't see me on the weekends.
Does this man work on the weekends?
No,
Does he take care of his parents? Is he a volunteer?
he isn't.
He is married, yes? He is at home with his family.
Yes, doctor.
Here is my advice. Gone. When one person only takes and one only gives, this is not a relationship, this is using. Tell him Dr. Ruth said enough.
I will. Thank you, doctor.
Write to me and tell me you left him. Bye-bye. The show was extended an hour. WYNY printed up Sex on Sunday t-shirts. There were over 3,000 requests. It's good to be Dr. Ruth. You are on the air.
Dr. Ruth, I've been going out with a guy for almost a year, and I like him a lot.
The only thing I don't like is that he wants me to have oral sex with him. I just can't do it. The worst thing is that he loves to give me oral sex, and I love it. I feel so selfish. What should I do?
Whipped cream or chocolate sauce, whatever is your favorite. Rub it on his penis and see if you like it then. If you still feel the same way about it, stop with the oral sex and get ice cream for the whipped cream and chocolate.
I felt something was happening.
One morning, I dropped coins in a blind man's cup and said, "There you are, bye-bye."
He said, "Thank you, Dr. Ruth." That's when I knew I was right.
The show started broadcasting nationally and in Canada.
You are on the air.
Doctor, when my wife and I make love, I keep my pajamas on and just unbutton my fly. My wife doesn't like it. She says I have to take everything off.
Why don't you?
Well, I guess I feel silly with no clothes on.
Try this. Take your pajamas off and be naked, except you can wear a necktie.
Where should I tie it?
Let your wife decide.
But don't tie it too tight.
Last call. You are on the air.
Dr. Ruth, I am very upset. I went into the living room last night and found my husband in front of the TV masturbating to The Wild Kingdom.
We are out of time. Everyone, good night and good sex.
Whew. Articles appeared in the New York Times, the London Times, the Wall Street Journal.
Someone wrote that my warm giggle sounded like a gerbil in heat.
Why did they listen?
I think it was this. People need to talk about sex.
And suddenly, here was a little matronly woman who did. I wasn't threatening, and my accent helped. They said I sounded like Sigmund Freud.
And I made them laugh. A lesson learned with humor is a lesson remembered. I had gone from being a professor to a celebrity overnight, and I loved it. Who wouldn't? And at 50, I was no starlet with only 15 minutes of attention. I was invited to appear on Johnny Carson and David Letterman. I told David about the young man who called me on the radio to say that before having sex, his girlfriend liked to toss onion rings on his erect penis.
David pretended to be speechless and walked off stage.
Oh, I have done David shows several times, and before station breaks, they show a picture of a plate of onion rings. A woman named Mickey Dwyer called me to discuss doing my own television show for Lifetime Cable Network. I did over 500 shows with my producer, John Lawless, and the guests we had, Joan Rivers said she gets her greatest orgasms going to Saks Fifth Avenue and saying, "Charge it." Elaine Boozler said her mother told her sex is a natural thing like a heart attack. George Burns called me Ruthie and said, "What's a nice girl like you doing in this sex business?" You, I will tell. In the Jewish tradition, sex is not shameful. It's a celebration of love. There is a phrase in Hebrew, tikkun olam. It means repairing the world. I never thought it would be through sex therapy, but this is my way. It is my obligation, since I have survived, and 1,500,000 children did not. One moment. Hello? Who? Yes, Mike's grandmother. Tell me, Elena, hello, how can I help you? Yes, I was born in Frankfurt. Really? On the Handelsstrasse? Then you were only 5 blocks away. Now, I'm a year older. Did you escape before?
That's what happened to my family, too. They were in Lodz before they were sent to the camp. Elena, did you know them? But they were not the Westheimers, they were Ziegels. My father is Julius, my mother is Irma, my grandmother Zelma. Did you ever? Are you sure? You must have seen them at Auschwitz or Lodz. If you saw their pictures, you might recognize them. Yes, I will bring them to you. Yes, good. I will talk to your grandson tomorrow. Thank you, Elena. Herzlichen Dank. God bless you. A survivor. She might know more. All I know is that my father was sent home from the work camp for a short time before all the Jews of Frankfurt were transported to the Lodz ghetto in 1940. Thousands of Jews a day were put on trains to the death camps. More died in those camps than Americans and Britons in the war. I know the gassing of the Jews began by January 1942. I know the Soviets liberated Auschwitz on January 27, 1945. They found over 7,000 prisoners, mostly sick and dying. I know my mother and my father and my grandmother were not among them. I know the last letter I received from my parents was September 12, 1941. Did they live 4 years? I don't know. I have no dates. How can they be dead with no dates? Sometimes I dream they are still alive, that they found me in Jerusalem, that they came to America and met Fred and their beautiful grandchildren, and my papa said, Mama, Carola is a doctor. I dream they are all here. My grandmother, my mother, my father, Fred, here, home. But they are here. Now it is me who is leaving. Hello? Pierre, can you ask the movers to come earlier tomorrow? As early as they want. I want them to help me unpack. Yes, unpack. I'm not moving. Call the realtors and tell them. I don't know what you should say. You are my Minister of Communications. Oh, and Pierre, call that decorator. Yes, call Nate Burkus and tell him I will do his television show if he will help me reorganize my apartment. Tell him there is a little clutter. And tell him he can't charge me. Another Westheimer maneuver. We will talk tomorrow. Bye-bye. Ah. This is Michal, Leora, Benjamin, and Ari. My grandchildren. When I look at them, I know Hitler lost, and I won. This is the washcloth that I took from my home. K.S. Carola Ziegel. This is me.